The crowd roared in the small town gym, their cheers echoing off the walls. At the center of the mat stood Jake the Tiger Thompson, the undefeated karate champion, his black belt tied tight around his waist. His muscles gleamed under the bright lights, and his smirk was as sharp as a blade. Across from him stood Lila, a quiet woman in a plain gray sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked small, ordinary, like someone who'd wandered in by mistake. The crowd laughed, whispering, "What's she doing here?" Jake flexed, cracking his knuckles, and taunted, "Ready to lose, little lady?" Lila said nothing, her eyes calm but sharp, like a storm waiting to break. Then it happened. Jake lunged, his fist flying toward her in a perfect strike. The crowd gasped, expecting Lila to crumble. But in one smooth, lightning-fast move, Lila sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and twisted. Jake's eyes widened as his own momentum betrayed him. With a single, graceful motion, Lila flipped him over her shoulder. The champion crashed onto the mat with a thunderous thud. The gym fell silent. Jake lay there, stunned, staring up at the ceiling. Lila stood over him, her face still calm, as if she'd done nothing special. The crowd's jaws dropped. How did this? Nobody just drop the unbeatable Tiger. But why was Lila even there? How did a simple woman end up facing a karate legend? And what secret was she hiding that let her take him down with one move? The answer lay in the hours before, and it was a story no one in that gym could have guessed. The day started like any other in the sleepy town of Willow Creek. Lila, a 30-year-old baker, was kneading dough at her tiny shop, Sweet Haven Bakery. Her hands were strong from years of work, but her smile was soft, and her customers loved her for it. She was the kind of person who'd give you an extra cookie just because you looked sad. Nobody knew much about her past. She'd moved to town 5 years ago and kept to herself. To everyone, she was just Lila, the nice lady with the best muffins. But trouble came knocking that morning. Jake and his crew of karate students stormed into the bakery, laughing loudly. Jake was a local hero, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a grin that screamed trouble. He'd won every karate tournament in the county, and his ego was bigger than the trophies lining his dojo. "Hey, baker lady," Jake called, leaning over the counter. "Heard you think you're tough. Bet you couldn't last 10 seconds in my dojo." His friend snickered, tossing crumbs from a cookie onto the floor. Lila wiped her hands on her apron, her face calm. "I don't fight," she said quietly. Jake laughed, loud and mean. "That's what cowards say. Come to my gym tonight. Let's see if you can handle a real challenge." The crowd in the bakery watched, some giggling, others uncomfortable. Lila just nodded, her eyes steady. "Maybe I will." The town buzzed with the news. Lila, the quiet baker, was going to face Jake in a sparring match. It sounded ridiculous. People whispered that Jake would crush her, that she was crazy to even try. But Lila didn't seem fazed. She closed her shop early, went home, and pulled a dusty wooden box from under her bed. Inside was a faded black belt, its edges worn but its knots tight. She stared at it, her face unreadable, then tucked it away. At the gym that night, the crowd was huge. Everyone wanted to see Jake humiliate the baker. Kids bet their pocket money on how fast she'd lose. Jake strutted onto the mat, bowing to the cheers. Lila walked in, her sneakers squeaking on the floor. No fanfare, no confidence, just that same quiet calm. The referee, a nervous man named Mr. Peters, explained the rules. A friendly spar, first to land a clean hit or takedown wins. Jake cracked his neck, grinning. "This'll be quick." The bell rang. Jake circled her, his fists up, taunting. "Come on, Baker girl, show me what you got." Lila stood still, her hands loose at her sides. The crowd laughed, thinking she was scared. Jake threw a fake punch, testing her, and she didn't flinch. "What's wrong? Too slow?" he mocked. Then he attacked for real, his fist aimed at her shoulder. That's when Lila moved and the world turned upside down. Now, as Jake lay on the mat, the crowd silent, Lila stepped back. Mr. Peters raised her hand, stuttering, "Winner!" Jake scrambled to his feet, his face red with fury. "This isn't over," he shouted, pointing at her. "You got lucky. I want a rematch." Lila didn't answer. She just turned and walked toward the locker room, the crowd parting like she was a ghost. Whispers filled the air. Who was she? How did she do that? And what would Jake do next? The gym doors swung shut behind her, leaving everyone wondering, what secret was Lila hiding? And would she face Jake again? The gym door slammed shut behind Lila, but the buzz in Willow Creek was just beginning. The crowd spilled out into the cool night air, their voices a jumble of shock and excitement. "Did you see that?" a boy whispered to his friend. "She dropped Jake like he was nothing." An old woman shook her head, muttering, "That Lila's got secrets. Mark my words." By morning, the whole town was talking. The baker who floored the karate champion was the story of the year. But nobody knew who Lila really was, and that mystery kept them hooked. Back at Sweet Haven Bakery, Lila was already at work, rolling dough as if nothing had happened. The bell above the door jingled nonstop. Customers came not just for muffins, but for answers. "Lila, how'd you do it?" asked Mrs. Carter, clutching her coffee. "Was it a trick?" Lila just smiled, her hand steady as she shaped a loaf. "No trick," she said softly. "Just something I learned a long time ago." Her answer only made the whispers louder. People noticed things they hadn't before. The way Lila moved, quick and sure, like she was always ready for something. The way her eyes scanned the room, calm but alert. Meanwhile, Jake was fuming. In his dojo across town, he punched a heavy bag until his knuckles bled. His students watched, nervous. "Lucky shot," he growled, sweat dripping from his brow. "She's nobody. I'll prove it." His best friend Mikey, a wiry guy with a loud laugh, egged him on. "You gotta crush her, Jake. Show everyone you're still the champ." Jake nodded, his jaw tight. He wasn't just angry, he was humiliated. The Tiger didn't lose, especially not to a baker. He started planning a rematch, but this time, he'd make sure Lila couldn't pull any tricks. He'd train harder, fight meaner, and make the town forget last night ever happened. Back at the bakery, Lila's quiet morning was interrupted when a kid ran in, out of breath. "Lila! Jake's talking big at the dojo. Says he's challenging you again tomorrow night." The customers froze, their eyes on Lila. She didn't look up from her dough. "Okay," she said, like it was no big deal. But inside, her heart thumped. She didn't want to fight again. She'd left that life behind kicks, punches, and pain. Moving to Willow Creek was supposed to be her fresh start. But Jake's mocking voice echoed in her head. "Little lady, you're nothing." She clenched her fists, flour dusting the counter. Maybe one more fight wouldn't hurt. That afternoon, Lila closed the bakery early again. She walked to the edge of town, where a quiet field stretched under the setting sun. There, hidden by tall grass, she started moving slow at first, then faster. Punches, kicks, spins. Her body flowed like water, each move sharp and perfect. She wasn't just practicing, she was remembering. Years ago, in a city far away, Lila hadn't been a baker. She'd been a fighter, trained by a master who saw something special in her. But that was a story she'd buried, along with the black belt in her box. Why had she stopped? The memory stung, but she pushed it away. She had to focus. Jake wasn't going to play fair. By evening, the town was electric with gossip. Posters were slapped on every lamppost. "Rematch! Jake the Tiger versus Lila the Baker. Tomorrow at 7. Jake's students handed them out, smirking like they knew something. At the diner, people made bets. "Jake's gonna destroy her," said one man, tossing back a soda. "No way," argued a girl. Lila's got something up her sleeve. Even Mr. Peters, the referee, was nervous. He'd seen Lila's move too smooth, too perfect to be luck. He wondered if Jake was walking into a trap. That night, Lila sat alone in her small apartment, the black belt on her table. She traced its worn edges, her mind racing. She didn't want to fight, but Jake's challenge wasn't just about her. It was about proving something to the town, to himself, maybe even to her. She thought of her old master's words. Strength isn't in the fist, Lila. It's in the heart. She sighed, tucking the belt away. Tomorrow, she'd face Jake again. But something felt wrong. Jake's anger was too hot, too personal. What was he planning? Across town, Jake sat in his dojo, a shadowy figure slipping him a small bottle. "This'll make sure she's slow," the figure whispered. Jake hesitated, then nodded. Just a little. Enough to win. His smirk was back, but it was colder now. The rematch was set, and he wasn't taking chances. Tomorrow, Lila would fall and the tiger would roar again. But as he hid the bottle, a chill ran through him. What if Lila wasn't as simple as she seemed? The sun dipped low over Willow Creek, painting the sky orange as the town buzzed with anticipation. The gym was packed tighter than ever, with people squeezing onto bleachers and standing against the walls. Kids waved handmade signs reading "Go Tiger," while others whispered Lila's name like it was a secret. The rematch was the only thing anyone could talk about. Jake the Tiger Thompson versus Lila the Baker, a fight no one could have imagined a week ago. The air crackled with excitement, but beneath it, a strange tension simmered. Something big was coming, and everyone could feel it. Lila stood in the locker room, her gray sweatshirt loose over her shoulders. She tied her hair back, her hands steady, but her mind racing. Last night's fight had been a fluke to the town, a lucky shot. But Jake's challenge today felt different, darker. She'd seen his eyes when he stormed out of the gym, burning with shame and rage. He wasn't just fighting for his title now, he wanted to crush her. Lila took a deep breath, picturing her old master's face. "Stay calm, stay sharp," he'd say. She nodded to herself, slipping on her sneakers. Whatever Jake had planned, she'd be ready. Across town, Jake was in his dojo, his crew hyping him up. Mikey slapped his shoulder, grinning. "You got this, Tiger. She's going down." Jake forced a smile, but his stomach twisted. The small bottle from last night sat heavy in his gym bag. It was just a little something to slow Lila down. The shadowy guy had said a drop in her water would make her sluggish, clumsy. Jake wasn't a cheater, but losing to a baker? He couldn't let that stand. He zipped his bag, jaw tight. "Let's do this," he muttered, striding toward the gym with his crew trailing like a pack of wolves. At the gym, the crowd roared as Jake entered, his black belt gleaming under the lights. He raised his fists, soaking in the cheers. "Who's the champ?" he shouted, and the crowd screamed back, "Tiger!" But some faces stayed quiet, their eyes flicking to the locker room door. Where was Lila? The referee, Mr. Peters, checked his watch, nervous. He'd heard rumors Jake's crew whispering about making sure he'd win. Mr. Peters clutched the whistle around his neck, hoping this would be a fair fight. Lila finally stepped out, and the crowd hushed. She looked the same as before. Plain sweatshirt, no flash, no swagger. But her steps were steady, her eyes locked on the mat. A few kids clapped, and a murmur spread. "She's brave," someone whispered. Jake smirked, circling the mat. "Back for more, Baker girl?" he taunted. Lila didn't answer, just took her place across from him. The bell rang, and the fight began. Jake moved fast, his kicks sharp and high. Lila dodged, her movements fluid, like she was dancing. The crowd gasped as she ducked a punch, then another. Jake's face reddened. He was throwing everything at her, but she was untouchable. "Stand still," he growled, lunging again. Lila sidestepped, her eyes scanning him. Something was off. His moves were wild, desperate, like he was hiding something. Then she saw Ida quick glance at Mikey, who stood by her water bottle on the sidelines. Her heart sank. They'd done something to her water. She hadn't drunk it yet, but the thought hit her hard. Jake wasn't just fighting her, he was cheating. Anger flared in her chest, but she pushed it down. She had to stay focused. Jake charged, his fist aimed at her face. Lila spun, grabbing his wrist, and for a moment, it looked like she'd drop him again. But Jake twisted free, shoving her hard. She stumbled, and the crowd gasped. Jake grinned, sensing his chance. "You're done!" he shouted, raising his leg for a crushing kick. Lila's eyes narrowed. She wasn't just a baker, and she wasn't going to let a cheat win. As Jake's kick flew toward her, she dropped low, her body moving like it remembered every lesson from her past. She grabbed his leg, twisted, and sent him crashing to the mat. The crowd erupted, but Jake rolled to his feet faster than before. His eyes were wild now, almost scared. "You think you're tough?" he spat, charging again. Lila braced herself, but something caught her eye, Mikey, slipping toward her water bottle again. Before she could react, Jake's fist grazed her shoulder, the first hit he'd landed. Pain shot through her, but she stayed upright. The crowd was on its feet, screaming. Jake was closing in, his confidence back. Lila's mind raced. She could end this now, but Mikey's move by the water bottle meant trouble. Was Jake desperate enough to try something worse? As he lunged again, Lila made a choice she'd fight, but she'd watch her back. And then, in a blur of motion, she ducked his punch and swept his legs out from under him. Jake hit the mat hard, and the gym shook with cheers. But as Lila stepped back, panting, Mikey shouted from the sidelines, "This ain't over, Baker." He held up her water bottle, a sly grin on his face. The crowd didn't notice, but Lila's blood ran cold. What had they done, and what would Jake do next to make sure she never humiliated him again? The gym was a storm of noise, cheers crashing like waves as Lila stood over Jake, her breath steady despite the ache in her shoulder. Jake scrambled to his feet, his face twisted with fury. "You're nothing!" he shouted, but his voice cracked, and the crowd's cheers drowned him out. Lila's eyes flicked to Mikey, still clutching her water bottle with that sly grin. Her stomach twisted. Whatever was in that bottle wasn't just a prank, it was a plan to ruin her. She stepped back, keeping Jake in her sights, but her mind was on Mikey. What were they hiding? Mr. Peters, the referee, blew his whistle, calling a break. The crowd buzzed, some chanting Lila's name, others yelling for Jake to fight back. Lila walked to the sidelines, ignoring her water bottle. She grabbed a towel instead, wiping sweat from her brow. Mikey smirked, thinking she hadn't noticed. But Lila saw everything, his quick glance at Jake, the way his fingers tightened on the bottle. She needed to know what they'd done, but she couldn't confront him now, not with the whole town watching. In the crowd, a girl named Sarah, barely 12, tugged at her mom's sleeve. "Mom, Mikey's acting weird with that bottle," she whispered. Her mom shushed her, but Sarah's eyes stayed glued to Mikey. She'd seen him slip something into the bottle before the fight, and it didn't feel right. Sarah was shy, but she'd always liked Lila's cookie sin, Lila's quiet kindness. She clutched her sign, "Go, Lila," and decided she had to do something. Meanwhile, Jake paced the mat, his crew hyping him up. "She's tired, Jake," Mikey called. "Finish her." Jake nodded, but doubt flickered in his eyes. Lila wasn't just lucky, she was good. Better than him, maybe. The thought made his fists clench. He glanced at Mikey, who gave a subtle nod toward the bottle. Jake's heart raced. If Lila drank it, she'd slow down, and he'd win. But if she didn't, he shook off the thought. He was the tiger. He didn't lose. The bell rang for the next round. Lila stepped back onto the mat, her eyes sharp. Jake charged, his kicks faster now. fueled by desperation. Lila dodged, but her shoulder throbbed from his earlier hit. She could feel the crowd's energy shifting, some rooting for her, others waiting for her to fall. Then Jake slipped, his foot catching the mat, and Lila saw her chance. She grabbed his arm, twisted, and threw him down again. The crowd exploded, but Jake rolled away, panting. "You can't keep this up," he spat. As Lila caught her breath, Sarah made her move. She slipped through the crowd, heart pounding, and reached Mr. Peters. "Sir, Mikey put something in Lila's water," she blurted. "Mr. Peters frowned, glancing at Mikey, who was now pretending to cheer. "You sure, kid?" he asked. Sarah nodded, pointing at the bottle. Mr. Peters hesitated, then grabbed the bottle and sniffed it. His face paled. "This isn't water," he muttered. Before he could act, Jake lunged at Lila again, his face wild. Lila dodged, but her foot slipped on a wet spot. Someone had spilled something on the mat. She stumbled, and Jake's fist swung toward her head. The crowd gasped, sensing the end. But Lila's training kicked in. She rolled, springing back to her feet, and caught Jake's arm mid-swing. With a quick twist, she sent him crashing down hard. The gym shook with cheers, but Lila's eyes were on Mr. Peters, who was marching toward Mikey with the bottle in hand. "Stop the fight!" Mr. Peters yelled, his voice cutting through the noise. The crowd froze. Jake lay on the mat, dazed, as Mr. Peters held up the bottle. "This is spiked," he shouted. "Someone tried to cheat!" Gasps rippled through the gym. Mikey's face went white and Jake's eyes widened in panic. Lila stood still, her heart pounding. The truth was out, but what would the crowd do now? And what secret from her past was about to spill next?